Doesn't matter your race. It doesn't matter you're Indian, you're Chinese, you're Eurasian, you're Peranakan. Doesn't matter. Someone would stop and help this person.
It does matter how we talk about race and religion, right? You have real heart-to-heart conversations. You have where it's not just like some politician screaming in the media.
Especially covering 3R, race, religion, royalty, because these are very sensitive topics.
We all care about each other. We all love each other. We all feel like we are keluarga lah.
Next to me in the red dress, we have Ushar Daniele, an independent journalist. And on the far right, we have a coordinator project Bangsa Malaysia Nathaniel Tan. How are you guys doing today? How are you guys feeling? Have you guys eaten today?
Feeling great.
Great. Excited. Thank you for having us on set with you.
And before we start, we just want to get to know the both of you beyond social media. Ushar Daniele, who are you outside social media?
So I'm Ushar Daniele. I'm Ushar Daniele. I'm an independent broadcast journalist, and I've been a journalist for 10 years, covering news in Malaysia as well as across the region. I work independently. That means I work for multiple news agencies, and my work has been published on Al Jazeera International, CNN, Vice News, CNA. There's so many, but yeah, basically I'm a reporter based in Malaysia, but I report climate, environment, as well as current affairs in Malaysia.
That's a lot. There's a lot. It sounds like fun, also hard work, but lots to talk about because we're going to focus on media landscape. And what are you, Nat? Who are you outside social media?
Isn't that an impressive CV? I'm very honored to be here alongside one of Malaysia's most prominent freelance journalists. Very exciting. Nat, outside social media, tak boleh cakap tu. Just kidding. I'm born and raised in KL. My parents are from Malaya. I lived in Taman Tu most of my life. Went to SRKDU, Sri Cempaka, Sunway College, the US. Came back. I've been working been a columnist, worked a lot in civil society, NGOs, things like that. Do a lot of work with organizations like ABIN, Vikram on one side, Chinese Assembly Hall, Dong Zong on the other side, groups in East Malaysia, things like that. Basically trying to bring more Malaysians together, the work that we do.
I see. Okay, so there's a lot to talk about today. We're going to focus mainly on Sabah, the progress for over 60 years. The last time we had the work ministry coming here to talk about the progress, and today we're going to focus more on the media landscape. And before we start, we just want to know, after 60 years since the formation of Malaysia, what has happened to our country, and are we really united in the name of Malaysia? Maybe we can start with you, Ushar.
Okay, thank you very much for that very important question, because I think this is a question that needs to be asked. This is speaking from my own experience reporting on the field, and my job takes me to places like remote kampungs in Kelantan and Terengganu to courtrooms in Putrajaya and in KL. So I meet a lot of people. I cover a lot. I meet a lot of people on the ground, on the field. Mm-hmm. So from my perspective, I think coming from someone who's always on the field, I think we are united. If you see one example that I can say that we are united is I wouldn't say that this is a terrible example, but it is an unfortunate example, is during an accident, if someone or if a motorcycle gets hit by someone on the road, immediately you would see Malaysians stopping. Doesn't matter your race. It doesn't matter you're Indian, you're Chinese, you're Eurasian, you're Peranakan. Doesn't matter. Someone would stop and help this person. So I think that embodies the spirit of Malaysia.
This is a lot.
It doesn't, you don't have to be the same color like me for me to want to help you. So I think that is one great example that I see on the field and on the ground when I'm out there working, is that we are united on the ground, but when you look at news reports, when you look at politicians, when they speak, and certain things that they say may look or make it sound like we're not united, but I still think that we are united. I mean, look at us. We're sitting at a table. You're Malay, I'm Punjabi-Dusun. He's Chinese Peranakan. I don't see any animosity here.
Yeah. And the fact that, you experience both sides because you cover the political side and also on the ground. How does it make you feel to see the difference in the news that you cover? It doesn't reflect what you see, how the local acts with each other. Because in the political side, we can see that they use a race card a lot.
Yep.
So how does it makes you feel as a reporter when you see both sides?
As a reporter, this is my own personal opinion. As a reporter, when I do see like the race card being used, like for example, the last general election, like when we speak to analysts, when we speak to experts, they say that this has always been the political move to make sure that it is a race-based vote or race-based politics. But I think a lot of people our age, I'm 33, I'm going 34, so I grew up with a lot of friends from different races, from who have different jobs, different careers, different perspective of life. But I don't see any animosity.
Yeah.
Someone who doesn't want to friend me because of my race or religion or my beliefs and my cultural background. But I think it has just been the norm in the last 60 years that racial politics is played, and this is not only played by current politicians, but the race card has been used and pulled many times in the last month or so by former prime ministers, which is not shocking, to be honest, but surprising, because like you were the glue that glued us all together in the 80s and in the 90s, and then what happened to this glue now that you are no longer in power? Yeah, I let Nathaniel. Okay, Nathaniel, what do you think?
Thanks so much. So I think in answering this question, right, I think of there being two Malaysias, like in a way. There's like personal Malaysia and public Malaysia, grassroots Malaysia and let's say political Malaysia, right? So yeah, in terms of personal grassroots Malaysia, right, when it comes person to person, day-to-day life, I think if you speak to a lot of older Malaysians, people sometimes 60s, 70s, 80s, that kind of age, they always say that it was a lot better back then, and it makes me sad sometimes to hear that kind of stories, and they always say it's a lot worse now, right, when it comes to like how much interaction there is, how easygoing things are between races and things like that, right? But at the same time, it's still there. I mean, Ushar gave a great example about accidents. We also think about things like kita jaga kita during MCO and stuff like that, right? So Malaysians do have a good ability to come together like at times of need, right? But that's a sort of more personal grassroots Malaysia. Like on the more public political Malaysia, it's terrible. That's how I would describe it. I mean, I think it has a lot. I think a lot about path dependency, right? How things turn out and what early structures affect the rest of the trajectory of a nation. So when we first started out as a country, our dominant political parties were a Malay party, a Chinese party, Indian party. There are a lot of political parties in the world that are basically ethnic parties, but very few of them have like the name inside there.
Yeah.
Malay party.
It's very specific.
Yeah, it's very overt, right? And once you structure things like that, right, and then sort of everything kind of like flows from there, because all the people in power, politicians, right, they think because their party, it's a race-based party, so I think about my race, so everything you talk about, your public discourse, all becomes race-centric, right? Mm. And then with whatever the politicians talk about, the media will report, and whatever media report, that shapes the heart and soul of Malaysia. So it is in the politician interest to divide people, because if you're not divided, then what do you need a Malay champion, a Chinese champion for, right? That's how you see it. And then so that sort of like really shapes the whole heart and soul of the nation, and it's been that way for decades. So Malaysians are raised on that diet of very racialized politics. So that part, in terms of like where our nation could be, in terms of how united we can be, I'd say in terms of if 10 is maximum potential, we are at about 2, if you're lucky, 3 lah.
That low, agree? That low.
For public political Malaysia, yeah, sure.
Okay. What is I am leaning more towards Nathaniel's opinion as well. Like, it's true. It's divide and conquer. It has been a strategy that way for many, many years, many, many centuries. And
the British is colonial.
And like dividing and conquering is much easier than uniting and getting everyone on the same page.
For you to gain control too.
Yeah, but I mean, to what extent? Yeah, to what extent do we separate the races? To what extent do we identify a Malaysian by their race?
Yeah,
and not by the nationality. Yes, what it should be.
Okay, that's a great input from the both of you to kickstart this conversation. And when you say Nat, you mentioned about the people in the 80s, and they prefer how it was back then in terms of unity. Isn't language policy such as Bahasa Malaysia as a national language helping in creating a united Bangsa Malaysia. Do you believe that? Or do you think the change to Bahasa Malaysia from Bahasa Melayu back in the 80s was merely rhetoric?
I think one of the things that I can talk about is like sometimes there's a bit of elitism, right? It's like the richer people in KL all speak English, right?
Yeah.
You go to Pavilion or KLCC, you walk into Prada, the guy's not going to start talking to you.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's they are and some people feel like, oh, I want to be atas, I want to be educated, I should speak. I hope that, and then some people feel like, people of my background, my class, they like learn BM for what? I mean, my 5 people still go to national school nowadays. Is next to which non-Malaysian that goes to national school is so rare nowadays. And so a lot of them grew up not really learning. And to me, it's very sad, and they say, there's no use, it's international value, better learn Mandarin or English. But to me, I don't know, there's a lot of value to it. I took SPM in DM and stuff like that, and I feel like it's given me a lot of access, given me a lot of I can be with different groups of people and feel more comfortable, and they can feel more comfortable with me. So the importance of having a national language that's really in the blood of the nation is important. It's not easy, right? And then we don't do it at the expense of other languages, but there's a lot of value to it, I feel.
Yeah, I agree.
And it's a beautiful language.
It's a beautiful language.
It's a lot more refined than a lot of English speakers think.
Yeah, because it's your mother's tongue. Why wouldn't you want to learn to speak your mother's tongue, right? And to that extent, who or what is Bangsa Malaysia to you? Like, if you can speak Bahasa Melayu or you cannot speak, but what is in general is Bangsa Melayu to you, Char?
Bangsa Malaysia, sorry. Okay, so Bangsa Malaysia to me it's not a concept, but it is naturally you and I and whoever that is born in this country. I went to Sekolah Rendah Kebangsaan. I went to Sekolah Menengah Kebangsaan. I went to college here. I was basically brought up on the Malaysian education system. And when you mentioned just now Bahasa Malaysia, Bahasa Melayu, to me it's like the name is just a name, but the essence of it, the language of it is, I personally think that it is important that you know your national language as to how a German would speak German, an Italian person would speak Italian, a Malaysian should be able to speak Malaysian. And what is a Bangsa Malaysia? What defines Bangsa Malaysia to me is someone who I know who is Malaysian, who understands and goes through the same frustrations as I do, that enjoys eating the food that I do, and understand that every time we go to the poll, you and I are no different because the vote is still a piece of paper and does not include your race or your religion. So Bangsa Malaysia to me is someone who is Malaysian, who embodies being Malaysian, which is always asking someone, have you eaten? Like I asked you just now. Dah makan ke belum? You say lah. Yeah, you say lah. You always you care about your neighbors. Like I know a lot of people like you mentioned just now, parents from the 80s. You grew up in the 70s, and the 60s, and the 80s. It's completely different. I grew up in the 90s. It was also very different compared to now. But I think that's just how things are. You can't retain what you had back then because it's just daily life. You change. We're changing every day. The country is changing and progressing. Also, at some point, regressing. Yeah. Sadly, in certain aspects. But Bangsa Malaysia is you and me and Nathaniel and everyone else in the studio right now. We're all Malaysians. Doesn't matter your race. Doesn't matter your religion. And I think we all can agree that we all enjoy eating nasi lemak in the morning.
Doesn't matter what color you are. Doesn't matter China, you enjoy nasi lemak. And how about you, Nat? Do you think the same way?
Thanks. This is something I think about a lot. So I maybe work backwards, right? I'll start by talking about what Bangsa Malaysia can be, right? And then talk a little bit about the slightly more boring stuff like that. But the most important thing I think about Bangsa Malaysia is that what it can be is a sense of belonging for all of us, right? The idea of having Bangsa Malaysia is the idea of like Malaysians, 32 million of us, feeling like we are one people, we are serumpun in a way, like right? This is our home, that we're all part of this. We're all in this big ship together, and we all want to see the ship go to a good place, lah. And we all care about each other. We all love each other. We all feel like we are keluarga, lah.
Yeah.
Okay, we say kaki lang, lah. We are brothers, lah. Brothers is saudara, saudari. That is That is the value of the idea of Bangsa Malaysia, right? That to me is the and because this is not that kind of feeling, that kind of sentiment. It's not tangible, but if you have that feeling, right, basically the ship can move faster lah and better. And if you don't have that feeling, if people on the ship are arguing all the time, then the machine don't work properly, the engine not right, the sail not right, and then you just more or less what's been happening lah. Okay, now that is to me is the important part about vaccination. Right? If I could only say, if I needed to stop there, I can stop there. This is a podcast and talk. We also talk. Bangsa Malaysia, right? It's not like this phone. It's not like the baju I'm wearing. You cannot touch it. You cannot feel it. You cannot describe it in a scientific or technical sense, right? But what it is, it is something that I used to study. If you want to get into the nerdy other part of it, right? Nation, many ways to. The words are interesting, right? We have bangsa, kaum, ras. In English, we say race, nation, it's all ethnicity, this kind of thing, right? All this, just words, right? One of the people who used to study this sort of thing is a guy named Benedict Anderson, right? So he described nations as imagined communities. So the important part here is the imagined part, right? Now when I say I Chinese, you Malay or whatever, what does that mean actually? What is it? Can I pick the blood and then I know exactly what is the code? This one is Chinese, that one, and it's like, and in Thailand got different many subsets. It's all these things actually, right? It's easy to say Chinese because you look, this guy, right? You say it's African, it looks African, right? But if you do really proper scientific division, categorization, it doesn't really work. All these are all imagined. It's same like you're American, German, whatever. One thing is your passport. But what does it mean to be? It's all really just in your mind, right? And it's what you're led to believe, what you're raised to believe. So in this sense, I really feel like Bangsa Malaysia is something that we can engineer, that has not been engineered. So again, if you say American, I believe in freedom, the German, efficiency, the Japanese are polite, right? What's a Malaysian? The first thing you say, makan, which is good. I'm all for the nasi lemak or the janai, but what else? Right? The idea of an imagined community is basically, I think, one that you feel there are things that are common among you. And I feel like this is not been well defined yet. Right? And that's the bad news is because it's not well defined and the people on the ship like to find they think they're all different, right? But the good news is that then we still have chance to define people like you and me. It's up to us. So what could it be? Let's just say for example, right? Why don't we we could think about as a Malaysian value as being, say, compassion. Right? So we this kind of thing is whether it's real or not depends on how much you repeat the same thing again. And if you keep saying the core value of Malaysianness is compassion, core value, you just repeat this again and again. After a while, people start to believe that. Then you may see people do something like Malaysian that fella. I say this is all something that we can do if we want to. Yeah.
It's a beautiful way to describe how Malaysian is, and it's right. I guess it's the character, and it's not based on your skin color or what you're wearing, as you mentioned earlier. And funny you say that because our former Prime Minister, Dr. Sri Najib Razak, once said, Bangsa Malaysian means we do not evaluate someone by their skin color, race, or religion. But how do you guys feel about this? Since we see a lot of 3R campaign nowadays in politics, do you think it's a progress or rest, Ushar?
I think we are stagnant. This is stagnation, where we're not moving beyond talking about race or religion. The current politicians are just stagnant. Like they're just on a float. They're on a float in the ocean, and they're just on the same float. They're not moving away from it. And I think there's way more issues that needs to be, way more pressing issues that needs to be talked about, that needs to be spoken about, needs to be reported about. But again, election season is coming. So election season means 3R topics will definitely come up because it gets headlines, it gets the clicks, it gets the readership that you want, but it is not what Malaysia is, essentially. So what I think about 3R being played, and with that quote that you gave that was said by Dr. Sri Najib Razak himself, well, it's a typical political move to get something. No, this is not something. This is this is not 2023 strategies. No, this has been since 1957. It doesn't change. But I think with the 3R issue now being brought up because of the general election, and yesterday we saw that the Kedah MB Sanusi was charged for actually speaking up against the Selangor Sultan, it looks like it's not being tolerated. It's not being tolerated anymore. Like it was at some point just not tolerable. It hurts me to see this kind of words being said by politicians, because it drains a Malaysian who actually cares about the country and cares about the fellow Malaysians here. But for supporters of the party, to them it's like, yes, this is fodder, we're definitely going to go for it. Yes, he's right. But it's not right. It's not right. What he said was not right. So this 3R issue now, with this charge being pressed in court yesterday, Magistrate Court in Selayang, it already shows that the authorities are not tolerating it. The judiciary is not going to tolerate it. And so I think politicians today need to realize that you can't just simply like release statement, especially covering 3R, race, religion, royalty, because these are very sensitive topics, and these are topics that could make or break certain communities, certain groups, because that's the last thing you want to do, is to see different racial groups fighting with each other, because it's been 60 years of independence. I think we can do better. Our politicians can do better. We can stray away from talking about race, religion, and royalty, and talk about more pressing issues like climate emergency, for example.
Which is more alarming.
This is alarming. This is happening in the real world. This is happening right now. But apparently, like,
they're not giving the attention that
it's not given the attention that it deserves. But because of political gain, you decide to be like, okay, I'm going to use the 3R card again. And this is very commonly used by politicians who are a bit older. Politicians who want to stir up the community and stir up comments and get the publicity. But they are good politicians. I believe there are good politicians out there. There are politicians who care about Malaysians in general. It doesn't matter your race. But I think Nathaniel would agree when I say that it's not new. This is nothing new. This is just a common thing because the state election is coming up. And once the state election is over, I'll give it at least 3 weeks.
Back to square one.
And then it's back to square one. So,
what do you think? Do you agree?
Thank you. Or with the last part, yes, of course, it's definitely anything new. I agree with Michelle, of course. Maybe some slight different views on this. I'm not so interested in 3R. I'm a bit more interested in 2R. I don't have much to say about royalty. To me, that's just a whole different thing. But, race and religion for me, I feel like for many years, people love to say, don't talk about it, don't talk about it. No, to me, it's like, you just imagine your family home, right? There's a pipe that should have butchered, it's a burst pipe or something like that, or it's a fan that doesn't work. It's always making noise, right? And then your son, your daughter asks, "Hey, Fafa, what's up with the fan?" Don't ask about the fan. Huh? Don't ask about the person with the pipe. Don't ask about the pipes. And then the kid also will be confused. And then, but the pipe is still leaking. The fan is still broken. I 100% agree. Don't stir up hate, nah. There's no who does that benefit, right? But sometimes it's very funny, I feel like the people who say don't stir up hate are the ones who are stirring up the most hate. And like I said, I don't change government, but then when the people and the rules change, but the script remains the same, right? And they say don't stir up this thing, don't stir up thing, punk up. Like, I don't believe that the answer, that the way to a more united Malaysia is to never talk about race and religion. That to me seems ridiculous. Like you and your wife got problem, and your solution is don't talk about the problem. I guarantee you the marriage is toxic. It's like good luck to you, right? You got problem, you talk about it lah. That's the only way, right? But there are different ways to talk about it lah. You unhappy your husband always late. You can yell at him, and then you all will fight lah, fight, and also you end badly lah, right? Or you can sit down, share your feelings with one another, saying this is when you do this, it makes me feel like that, right? What I need from you is this. It is kind of like different, the kind of stuff that they teach you at couples counseling, right? So that's how. I think it's a bit ridiculous to think that Malaysia will get better if we never talk about race and religion. But it does matter how we talk about race and religion, right? We have real heart-to-heart conversations. You have. Where it's not just like some politicians screaming in the media, the people taking cycle comments. It's more like human to human like this. You sit down, you talk, and you say, how do you really feel? How can we look for ways to do this better, do that better? I feel there's a lot of benefit to conversation, right?
But do you think like how they talk about 3Rs now, it's not really in a positive light? Do you think it would shape how the future generation would be, since we're talking about progress, right? Over 60 years. But perhaps how teenagers, they can see everything on social media, the good and the bad. Do you think it would affect how it would shape their mindset in the future because of how they use these 3R cards?
Okay, so I agree with Nat when he says that these are stuff that you need to talk about. These are deep underlying issues that has made Malaysia, but also in a way break Malaysia because of 3R. And like you said, it's mostly 2R because we don't really speak of royalty. That is not a conversation that we would usually have with day to day. That's not a conversation. But race and religion, it is definitely a conversation that we need to have. Once we start having these uncomfortable conversations with each other is when you are able to understand me better and I'm able to understand you better. So with that understanding, you're definitely going to shape minds much better. So I think when it comes to students, I know students are active on social media. We have one of the highest social media penetrations in Southeast Asia and Asia. They use their phones all the time. They're always on social media. They're on Twitter. They are aware of news. They are aware of what's happening. And we can thank Undi 18 for that. Because Undi 18 really sparked an interest in teenagers to be aware of politics. And they're like, yes, I want to understand. I want to learn. I want responsibility. Yes, they understand that. So when you start talking about race and religion more openly, not like how our politicians do it in a better manner, and like this, sit down, have a conversation, have a forum, have a heart-to-heart talk with your closest friend, for example. Like you can ask difficult questions to your closest friend with no judgment, and you are still learning. It is still a journey, and you're still learning about it. So I think it would shape minds really well if you are able to have difficult conversations. Because difficult conversations are very hard to have, but the outcomes of difficult conversations are going to be really, really good. Or if it goes haywire, if it goes bad, you understand why. Because the conversation was had. Like we had a conversation, like what made you angry about me or what made me upset about you. We're going to understand that. And I think this 3R issue needs to be managed, handled, and used carefully if it wants to be used as a tool by politicians. But also remember that they are future generations who are watching you, listening to you, reading the news about you. So they're going to form their own opinions about you. And if they grew up in a community like perhaps I did, where it was a group, different races, like one Malay neighbor, I had good Chinese friends, Indian friends, like I speak a little bit of Tamil, a little bit of Chinese because of this friendship that I had. We're gonna be okay if this conversation is allowed. But if you're gonna stifle, you're gonna like stop this conversation. You're gonna put a hold at conversations that matter, like race and religion. You're gonna stop people from thinking. Critical thinking is very important. Critical thinking when it comes to race and religion is also very important because there are times where you need to practice certain like you understand your peers a lot. Like I have, for example, you have Malay friends, can? If you want to have an open house, you have Malay friends coming over, you should not serve. And you know not to serve non-halal drinks and food because it's just respect. You just know it. And like, it's the same as you have like Indian Hindu friends. They come over, you don't serve beef. You don't need a matter of respect. You don't need to tell someone to do that. It's ingrained in you. You should grow up in this country. But to use that and use that as a fodder and telling your Malay friends who come over to your house, I didn't serve no halal food because of you. See? It's the conversation there. It's like how he said, it's how you have this conversation. But if you tell your friends, like, don't worry, if you come over, there will be no non-halal food. You can enjoy the food. It just sounds much better. So I think communications need to be much better. Some of these politicians probably need to go for maybe PR classes to understand that you can talk about difficult and sensitive issues, but word it in a way where you also make sense and not just come off as straight up asshole. Like, just don't do that.
Well, that's a great way to answer that because it is communication is key. A good conversation is much needed, right? Budi bahasa budaya kita.
So kalau budi bahasa budaya kita, kenapa kita tak boleh duduk dan bercakap elok-elok? Kita boleh bercakap TO.
Without you cut.
Yes, like you can put the race aside and let's talk about what made you so unhappy with me today. Like, what did I do? I'm sorry. It's just simple.
It's simple. Okay, that's a good way. Do you agree, Nat?
Yeah, it's sure.
And you grew up in Sabah.
No, I did not.
I did not.
I grew up in KL, my whole life.
Yeah, okay.
So I grew up, I moved back to KL. My parents moved back to KL with my brother and I that time when I was 1. But I've been going back to Sabah ever since.
Okay.
If not yearly, so it's
your
just once. It's memang my kampung. I go back to Sabah almost every year, sometimes twice a year.
Okay.
And I have memories of growing up in the city, in Kuala Lumpur city, and I have memories of mandi sungai in Sabah.
So you know more about representation in Sabah because you know the ethnicity there is just great. There's a lot. And do you think there are enough stories about Sabah from Sabah representing the people and the beauty of Sabah? The fact that you go there every year to visit your family members, perhaps your friends there. What do you think?
There are a lot of stories that are being told on so many mediums. There are films, there are documentaries, there are news reports. There are even content creators, social media content creators. And these are stories that are slowly being told. And I mean, I grew up obviously Malaysia. I grew up in KL. But growing up in KL and going back to Sabah is two different worlds altogether for me. It was really like two different worlds for me. It was... Because you're flying, first off, as a kid, when you fly off 2.5 hours away from your home, it's already like... It's a big deal. It's a big deal. So it's 2.5 hours of flying, and then you get to KK, and then back then in the 90s, it took me, my kampung's in Kota Belud, so it took me about 1.5 hours or 2 hours on windy roads to go back to the kampung. So I have that memory like ingrained in my head. I remember the road, I remember the routes. And I know that there are stories being told. When I grew up reading newspapers, because I'm based in KL, I get to read Peninsula stories only. And if I wanted to read Sabah Sarawak stories, if I wanted to find out more, I would have to ask my mom or my cousins, or I would have to rely on newspapers that are from Sabah and Sarawak. But you don't have access to that.
Yeah.
But now, with internet penetration, with the digital transformation, I could read a story from Sabah at any time. I could Google it and I could get a story now. And that is amazing.
So do you think the media coverage in Sabah has like widened, increased for the past period?
In the last 10 years, the stories that I see from Sabah and Sarawak has definitely increased. There is a lot more growing interest from Peninsula to understand the plight of Sabahans and Sarawakians. As we know, Sabah is one of the poorest states in the country, so infrastructure is not good. Some places, internet connection is not good. Until today, last year, I went back to my kampung. There are certain pockets of the kampung where you don't have line still. That's one. On the way back to this kampung is where the Pan Borneo Highway is, the route is. So it's just gravel. It's just road. It's just gravel and batu and there's no proper roads.
Yeah.
And I'm a completely healthy person who can sit in a car and manage through that. Can you imagine that ambulances have to go through that road? So infrastructure is still poor there. Some places, internet connectivity is poor. There's no internet penetration. There's no electricity. So there are gaps. There are definitely gaps. But I think Sabah and Sabahans are doing their level best to tell stories representing different ethnicities, different groups, different cultures, because it's there's so many different groups, ethnicities. There's so many, even like I'm part Dusun. Even Dusun, the Dusun group, there is like a few Dusun. There's Dusun Tebelum, Dusun Tindal. There's a lot. So there are a lot of people talking about it now, and I'm actually learning. I'm still learning. It's still a learning process for me as well. It's a learning process not only for me as a journalist, wanting to tell stories, more stories from Sabah and Sarawak, but also it is an individual learning process for me as well to understand, like, okay, I was not told this when I was younger. I was not taught this when I was younger, so I need to learn it now. So with the internet, I'm able to learn my culture. So with the internet, little people in Sabah and Sarawak are able to understand and see what's happening in Peninsula. And it's amazing when you have conversations with people in Sabah and Sarawak, because they also know what's happening in Peninsula. They will ask me, what's happening in Selangor? And I'm like, okay, I will tell you what's happening in Selangor.
That's very good because like the communication, like we said earlier, communication is like really important. And Nat, do you think the people in Semenanjung Peninsula are educated enough when it comes to topic in stories in Sabah and Sarawak?
Oh, I wouldn't use the word educated, but I feel like the gap between West Malaysia and East Malaysia is tragic, you know. A lot of West Malaysians don't understand anything about Sabah. They don't. When they think of Malaysia, they only think about, you know, the side where there's a lot. There's a lot more. There's a lot of richness of diversity, and I think we would benefit a lot from having more input from Sabah and Sarawak into the national fabric, into our imagination, right? I think we benefit a lot of West Malaysians who are more, you know, aware, more interested, more exposed, right? You sort of like have to open up that world with them, right? And I think it was also benefit Malaysia a lot if Sabah and Sarawak feel more like they're part of Malaysia. And I think it's very common that Sabah and Sarawakian don't feel a part. They feel a bit condescended to, you know, and they don't feel like they are treated fairly. And I get it, right? Some people even talk about secession and this kind of thing, right? So I understand why they feel that way. And clearly we're not doing enough to bridge that gap. I really wish we were.
Because it's been like 60 years, and isn't it like a relatively slow process for people? It's 2023, and some people in Peninsula are still not well informed.
And you think about it, talking about 60 years, this is 60 years of Malaysia, right? No, obviously we are more from Malaysia to like Merdeka, 57, that is the year, right? But I mean, you think about it, decolonization, are we the only country that was, you know, decolonized, that managed to gain its independence, whether it was some white power?
Yeah.
Of the countries in the world, you know, that went through this experience, how many countries were formed by bringing together different parts? This is much rarer.
Isn't it?
More how many countries split now?
Yeah.
But in countries, you know, different regions come together to form a new country. That's quite a rare thing. It doesn't happen very much, right?
It's very historical.
Yeah, and it's something very beautiful, like, you know. So I always personally, like, I prefer to celebrate Malaysia Day, right? Because that's the day where we became Malaysia, right? And this idea of coming together, right? Isn't that kind of like what the whole country needs? A sense of coming together, not just within West Malaysia, East Malaysia, but within every little, right? It's so beautiful and meaningful, like, that sort of, rather than yes, like, I mean, I'm not trying to like be mean or, you know, like to make small of whatever independence efforts and all. That's a whole other good big story. But this is, in my view, an even bigger story, even more beautiful story. That's about it.
Okay, and just before we end the podcast today, I have like a few maybe rapid fire questions a bit for the both of you. So we're gonna start with Nat. If any of Malaysians go to Sabah, what must we try when we go to Sabah?
You mean for Ushar? I don't know. I have.
For me?
Yeah.
What to try?
Yeah.
Food?
Yeah.
Okay, so food. Okay, I may be a bit more biased.
Okay.
My favorite thing to eat from Sabah whenever I go back to Sabah is two things.
Okay.
First is tarap. Tarap is a type of fruit.
Okay.
It is like a jackfruit.
Okay.
Dia macam nangka, tapi bukan nangka. It's when you open it, the flesh is small. It looks like nangka, but it's very tiny and it's very sweet and creamy, and the smell is very, very strong. So there's tarap. If you ever get a chance to try tarap, please do. It is an experience that you can only enjoy in Borneo, actually. If it's not tarap, I like another fruit. I just miss the fruits lah, because you can only get it in Borneo, is bambangan. Bambangan is a type of wild mango
Okay.
that looks like a mango. It's brown on the outside and it's very fibrous.
Okay.
Where you peel it, you have to, like, you know how you potong like straight lines over it, and you have to cope it. You know, you can't like peel it with a peeler. You have to cope it all.
Like cope it like banana.
Yes, like that. So you have to peel the skin off, and you could either eat it fresh like that on its own, or you can eat it with chili padi. You potong with kicap. You can dip it in and eat together with fried fish, ikan basong, ikan sardin, with sayur and rice. And it is like the best thing. It defines my kampung for me is bambangan, chili padi, rice, ikan goreng and sayur. That's like,
You cannot find it anywhere in Semenanjung.
you can find it now. You can actually go and find it in Pasar Borneo. So anyone who is watching, like, go to Pasar Borneo and see Kembangan, and you can find actual local vendors, Sabahan vendors, who brought these fruits to Peninsula, because I think now there is a massive demand for Sabahan goods actually in Peninsula.
I should go.
Oh my God, please do. Please go and try. Please go and try me. Please try me, Tuaran. Please try all the mee soup that you can find. Bambangan, tarap. If you also lucky, you can try linopot. Linopot is it's like nasi campur.
Okay.
It's wrapped in a leaf. I don't know the name of the leaf. I'm so sorry, my ancestors. I don't know the name of the leaf. But inside is like nasi campur with brown rice, with fried fish usually, one type of vegetable, and then 2 or 3 types of different jeruk. Bambangan is one, and then there's like boso nangka. Boso is also a type of jeruk.
Okay.
And this is like traditional kampung food that you can find in KK. And also if you go to Pasar Sri Kembangan, I hope and pray that you get to try.
We try any of the food in this.
Please do try.
Go to Sri Kembangan.
Please do try.
And for your nut, can you suggest us a must-try Peranakan dish?
I'm not Chinese Peranakan. My dad's side is like basically in China, and my great grandfather.
Yeah.
My mom's side is Chitti. He's Indian Peranakan, so to speak. Indians that have been in the country for a very long time. So very similar. They speak Malay, very kebaya and all that, but not Hindu and that sort of thing. So yeah, there's a Kampung Chitti in Gajah Berang in Malacca. And so my uncles and cousins got married.
So from Kampung Chitti?
Not really now, but I mean the clan is back on elder there. Yeah. So and you know, you ask like what's the famous Chitti food? Like all my uncles, aunties, will he answer this question correctly? The answer is probably not. The only thing that we still eat like my mom will sometimes make kueh bada, you know, which is a little bit like a curry puff, but it's not really. It's like a veggies inside a tauge and you put in some sort of chili kind of thing. So that's one of the Malacca things. It's not a Chitti dish, but if you go to Malacca, for me, I know, when it comes to like films, music, I seldom say I have a favorite for so many things, right? When it comes to food, if you say favorite, the first thing that comes to my mind is chicken rice balls.
Oh, yeah.
And now got halal one also.
Yeah.
But these things is food of my childhood. Those rice.
I see that getting more attention now, chicken rice ball on social media.
I'm a bit strange. You know, people like when people eat nasi lemak or even chicken rice, they talk about the sambal or the chili sauce. Me, I only care about the rice one. I'll taste the rice and I'll see whether it's nice or not. A bit strange when some of the chicken rice balls there is another level. Yeah.
Simply. Okay, last question. What is your favorite Malaysian dish ever?
I just answered it.
What favorite?
Pretty much.
You sure? I like to eat.
I can tell.
To eat. I don't have a favorite.
Okay.
I can't say I have a favorite. But if you ask me to pick one dish from 3 main races like here, okay, so if Malay dish, I will pick tempoyak ikan patin. Like I would drive to Temerloh just to eat tempoyak ikan patin because I love tempoyak ikan patin. And then when we go to Chinese food, obviously it is chicken rice. Chicken rice is the most simple but the most fulfilling lunch or dinner you can have. It's just simple. Chicken, cucumber, sambal, rice, and ketchup, and you're done. And then if you ask me for Indian food, obviously I would definitely pick a banana leaf rice any day because a banana leaf rice meal is complete, and I dare to say that you can unite a lot of Malaysians over a banana leaf.
When you go to banana leaf shops, you can see all races. They're there eating the same meal.
We're eating the same meal. We're eating the same food. We're all using our hands. And we are happy and satisfied. Banana leaf rice is the way to go.
All right. Thank you so much, guys, for coming to today's podcast. Thank you, Ushar. Thank you, Nathaniel, for coming to From Malaya to Malaysia 60 Years podcast. This was a very fruitful conversation, and I feel like this topic needs to go beyond this podcast specifically. And to those who are watching and listening, make sure to leave a comment if you agree or disagree with their opinions. We want to hear your thoughts. And if you want to get the latest updates and other exclusive interviews and future episodes of From Malaya to Malaysia 60 Years podcast, make sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel, social media, follow all of our TikTok, YouTube, LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram to get the latest updates as well. I'm Athira Aminuddin. Thank you so much for watching and listening. I'll see you guys next time. You've just watched From Malaya to Malaysia's 60 Years podcast special, a campaign collaboration between Sinar Daily, Bual Studio and Reka Sounds. We hope you enjoyed today's episode, and make sure to follow and subscribe Sinar Daily's social media platform, Sinar Daily MY, for more. I'm Athira Aminuddin. Thank you for watching.